Okay, friends, welcome to another installment of Thursday Night Bible Study. We're working our way through the life of David, slowly but surely. We're to one of the high points this evening, 2 Samuel chapter 11. Should be fun for everyone to discuss. We've looked at a lot of David's shining moments. Not one so shiny tonight. So, 2 Samuel 11. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. I'm going to try to be a grown-up about this tonight. I'll do my best. Okay. She was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "She's Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent messengers to get her. I'm not sure what my issue is.
You're hungry, that's probably what it is.
I'm sure that's what it is. I haven't had anything I really like to eat for several days. She came to him, and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, "I am pregnant." So David sent this word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet."
You want me to read it?
I should just go ahead and turn this thing off now and just go home. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace while his master's servants did not go down to his house. One moment. You want me to read? I'm not sure what my issue is, other than mental instability. Oh, we all have a little bit of that.
Take a big deep breath.
Susan got here first and got real crazy.
Yeah. Blame it on me, James. It's okay, I can handle it. It's not the first thing that's been blamed on me. Before we go last.
But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go down to his house. David was told Uriah didn't go home. So he asked Uriah, "Haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to him, "Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day, and the next, at David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it he wrote, "Put Uriah out in front where the fighting is the fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." So, while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Joab sent David a full account of the battle. He instructed the messenger, "When you have finished giving the king this account of the battle, the king's anger may flare up, and he may ask you, 'Why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know they would shoot arrows from the wall?' Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubbesheth? Didn't a woman drop an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died in Thebez? Why did you get so close to the wall? If he asks you this, then say to him, moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. The messenger set out, and when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, the men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. However, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. David told the messenger, say this to Joab, don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. Finally got through it. I'm not sure what my issue is. So, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in 2 Samuel 11. This is the first time that, for quite a while, that there isn't a parallel passage over in Chronicles. There's really only about one verse that overlaps, as there's zero mention of Uriah and Bathsheba over in the in First Chronicles, but we do have just this very first verse in First Chronicles 20, verse 1. Who else are you talking to? I don't know. Oh. Sorry. A little parenting going on right here. One moment, please. The Xbox has been put in timeout, and they don't know where it is.
Dad.
I hit it. It's been gone for most of the week. It's been awesome. 2 Samuel 11. We read that it's the time that kings go off to war.
And that's all it says in Chronicles 20.
Yeah, that's pretty much the whole deal.
When the kings go off to war, Joab led out the armed forces. He laid waste in the land. That's all it says.
The Ammonites and went to Rabbah and besieged it, but David remained in Jerusalem. Joab attacked Rabbah and left it in ruins. That's all 1 Chronicles 21 tells us. So it is spring, end of spring maybe, which is usually when the kings start rutting around to make war, because it's not raining anymore. There's no snow and ice. The roads are not a mud hole. You can actually move your troops. Plus, there is stuff that's growing for horses, cattle, all the livestock that you'll need to feed your army.
Why is the war so important? That's what they do? They just go to war?
Yeah.
Well,
David's plan, looking back a chapter or so, David's plan has been to not just rule this little bit here that had been Israelite territory. He's trying to move all the way across the Jordan, all the way up, and we've seen that he has had some success. Okay, so he's in Jerusalem, Everybody else is over here in the territory of Ammon, fighting fighting at Rabbah, which is like the citadel, the capital city for the Ammonite kingdom. He's already had one run-in with the Ammonites. The Arameans got involved. Now he's sending people back. He's taken this territory. God told him he would expand his territory. He would help him subdue his enemies. And so David is making that happen.
Okay.
So, again, those first verses there in Samuel 11 and Chronicles 20 just really kind of lay it out for us. There's probably some more there than we realize. It's time when kings go off to war. They leave the palace, they leave their throne, they go out and lead their troops in battle, especially when they're an incredible warrior like David. But we read right there, but David remained in Jerusalem. And nothing about that decision is going to be good for David or for Israel. This is really kind of a hinge pin. Everything that we've seen with David, for David, by David, about David has all been positive. God has given him incredible success. He has blessed him. He's a man after God's own heart. He has crowned the king. He's the hero warrior of Israel. And now, 2 Samuel 11, the worm turns.
But why? He just didn't go.
He didn't go. I'm not sure. We don't really have any other information other than
he was sick with the flu, or
he didn't leave.
Okay.
And so.
But he didn't go because of this.
No.
Well, I'm assuming there are some people who would say, well, clearly David was planning this all along. He stayed home while the cat's away. The mice will play, even if the mice is a big rat sitting on the throne.
But it said he sent.
I'm not really sure that we can say that. We don't have a reason given any place for why David didn't go. For some reason, David, the warrior king, decided to stay in Jerusalem and send his army off to fight the war.
Yeah, I don't want to jump ahead, but if he planned that all along, he wouldn't have had to ask anybody.
Who she was.
that on the roof over there?
Yeah, who's that woman? That's what I was
saying.
saying.
That night.
But he had conquered so much prior to that, and it says that he just destroyed the Ammonites and besieged
Rabbah.
Just two places where all the other ones were these people. Maybe he didn't feel like if it was just the two that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that doesn't exactly perfectly line up. I think there's probably some things missing from one of the accounts. So David led Israel in a fight against the Ammonites, had victory, which we read about a chapter or two ago. The Arameans were enlisted to come in and help. He beat the Arameans, and then the Ammonites kind of were rallying again. It's my belief that that's what this battle is, that David is sending Joab and the rest of the army to kind of clean up this last little bit there at the capital city. He probably doesn't need to go. I'm sure he's doing all kinds of rationalizing. Maybe he's tired. Maybe his allergies are acting up. We don't know.
He has the flu.
The hoopty flutus. So, on some given day, after the army has gone off to war in Ammon, David is at home in the palace, got nothing better to do. It is not unusual to find people in the Middle East taking a nap in the middle of the afternoon. You know, in the springtime, it can get into the 70s and 80s during the day, which, you know, for some people is kind of warmish. And to escape some of that heat, they go lay down and take a nap, a little siesta in the afternoon. And so now, where the story picks up, it is the early evening. David is up from his royal siesta. David is strolling around the palace rooftop. The palace doesn't have a dome on the top of it. It doesn't have a pitched roof. It has a flat roof, maybe even a covered flat roof. So it's more like a, I don't know, more like a California porch. You know, you got the posts and you got the beams that run, so there's some shade. Just but open air. There's
like a pergola.
Yeah, sure. An arbor, pergola, something along those lines. There may be
Covered walkways, sort of kind of thing.
some curtains, some shade. It's the palace. Whatever it is very nice, I'm sure. So he's wandering around on top of the palace. The language indicates that he's not really doing anything in particular, just kind of taking a little stroll.
There and
surveying the city, looking, you know.
Setting the scene.
You'd like to believe that the palace is one of the higher places in the city. It might be the tallest building except for some fortresses. So he's able to look all the way around. There's Jerusalem. He can look all the way around the hill, all the way around the valley, on any side of him. He can see the people. There's probably at least 2,000 or 3,000 people that live in Jerusalem at that point. So it's a little burg, just kind of enjoying the evening. And all of a sudden he notices something out of the ordinary. I hope it's out of the ordinary and he's not being creepy, but he notices that a woman not far away is bathing, and the description is that she is exceedingly agreeable or pleasant in appearance. She is very desirable. That's what the language means. She is exceedingly agreeable. That is something I aspire to just be exceedingly agreeable. Easy on the eyes, apparently, is the deal. And I sort of imagine, you know, she is the young bride of a military guy. She's a military wife at home all alone.
And he's the king.
So she is either bathing on her roof or down in a courtyard inside her home walls, and the king notices her. And this would have been an opportunity for David to go, "Oh my word! Oh, I was not expecting that. I better go do something else."
Nope. David's a man.
No, he
Also,
actually sort of leans in,
that
dials
happened for me,
in,
huh?
pays a little more attention, and is like, "Who is that fair young maiden over there?" And so he learns that the woman is the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Uriah is one of David's mighty men. We talked a few chapters ago about the mighty men. They are the best warriors in Israel. They have been with him since probably the very beginning. They have gone with him through all of that stupid running away from Saul in the wilderness. They have fought alongside him in every battle. Philistines, Amalekites, Edomites, Enites, Pickenites, whoever they are, they have been there. They have been loyal. They have been faithful. They helped him overtake the city of Jerusalem to make it his capital. Over in 2 Samuel 23, and in 1 Chronicles 11, are duplicate passages. These are the names of David's mighty warriors. There's like 36 names, and Uriah the Hittite. In the Chronicles passage, these are the chiefs of David's mighty warriors. They, together with all Israel, gave his kingship strong support to extend it over the whole land as the Lord had promised. This is the list of David's mighty warriors, 36 names, and Uriah the Hittite.
So he was maybe more special?
He is a chief among warriors. He is in the elite squad. He is one of the most trusted soldiers. He has done amazing things, fought alongside David. So, this bathing beauty doesn't just belong to another man. That's bad. But he belongs to a man who has devoted himself to serving David and fighting at his side for years.
David didn't have a conscience, or
I do not
Maybe
know.
it was all her fault. She came to him, and maybe it was all her fault.
I don't understand why first of all, David didn't know who she was. And second of all, when he found out who it was, that he didn't go, oh my gosh, you're right, that is his wife. I'm out. No. He is totally consumed by this exceedingly agreeable and pleasant in appearance young woman.
Sorry.
So he sends for Uriah's wife to be brought to the palace. Short version is, they have sex, and she goes back home. It is not love. It is absolute lust. Now, the text makes a point, depending on which version you read, it makes a point about about the bathing and washing that's going on here. It isn't clear if some of it is before the affair with David as a means of regaining her ritual cleanness, because the law of Moses said that there were certain things that you ate or touched or did that made you ritually, or my favorite word to try to say, ceremonially unclean. And if you were ceremonially unclean, you didn't touch anybody else. You couldn't go make a sacrifice. You had to wash, you had to bathe, you had to eventually, once evening had come, you had to go make a sacrifice to deal with your uncleanness. So for a woman, that blessed time of the month was dealt with purification from being ceremonially unclean, because blood and human fluids.
That's right.
Not tissue. Yeah, human fluids. I'm not just talking about anything going on in the sexual act, but spitting on somebody, oozing your sore onto somebody, anything that came out of your body like that could make you unclean. And so,
sweat too, also
maybe
could be, yeah.
Maybe that's where that saying came from. Then keep your fluids and semi-fluids to yourself.
I don't know that one.
Now you do.
Okay, so it may be that when David sees her, that she is just finishing up that blessed time of the month, and because that would maybe indicate something about her ability to, well, first of all, have sex, because if you were in the middle of your period, you weren't supposed to have sex because there's all that blood and fluids, and that would make you unclean. As I said, I'm super excited about this lesson.
Yeah.
Okay?
Let's just get through it.
So, it could be.
We're not the whole congregation.
I tend to believe that when it talks here, it sort of seems chronologically true, that they have had their 20
Encounter.
minutes of passion, and he's done with her, and so she is washing afterward, because again there would have been a transfer of fluids and she would be unclean until the evening. God made sex and he made it to be good, but it would still cause you to be ceremonially, I hate that word, ceremonially unclean until the evening.
But it's really bizarre that they put that in there. Now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanliness.
Yeah, which is reading a little bit into the language that's there. Doesn't really say that exactly. It doesn't. It's not really clear, which I think is probably an indication that A, nobody knows. B, it might not make a big difference, because either way, what it shows is, I suppose it's kind of germane to the conversation. That if she has just finished with her menses, then then she can have sex and could potentially be pregnant. If at the other end of the spectrum, if this is washing after the fact, she's the one doing all the washing up. She's concerned about being ritually clean, but dumb David is not.
Whatever this whole thing was, she became pregnant.
He doesn't seem to have any concerns about the morality of his actions or their impact. He is apparently, it's the time when bulls go rutting or something. I'm not sure
Spring.
what his deal is. Okay, now.
Spring,
Mine doesn't say anything except she purified herself after the act.
No, it didn't say that. That's not what it says.
That's what his says.
Mine says she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness.
Is that below the line?
No, that's right in the text.
Okay.
It says that here.
So-
Now
But
she was
see, in a different
purifying-
translation,
My verse
they've gone
says,
with a different understanding.
He lay with her, and when she had purified herself from her uncleanness, she returned to her house.
See,
that's not
I
it says
believe
that, and
this
then
is
she went
accurate.
back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, "I'm pregnant."
Because
That was quick.
Okay, now-
if she knew that, she would have gone. And
Before things get, mean and nasty in here,
Sit over here, Dawn.
I'm just going to remind you that the punishment for adultery under Moses' law is pretty severe.
Mostly for
Okay.
the female, isn't it?
Find in your Bible, Leviticus,
I don't even know where to start to find that.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus.
Numbers.
Leviticus 20.
it says,
20 what?
20 verse 10.
okay.
Leviticus 20:10.
Oh, wait a minute.
Are you there?
Oh, it is saying both of them.
I am.
20.
So then technically they both should be put together.
If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, with the wife of his neighbor, which apparently he was, both the adulterer and the adulteress are to be put to death.
So they both should have been put to death. He's the king.
If they get caught, they should both be dead.
Wouldn't the people who went and fetched her know what he was doing?
It would seem like you would have to have been really gullible or really intentionally stupid to not figure out what was going on.
Here's one. If a man marries both a woman and her mother, it is wicked. But this
Yeah.
this whole
That's
thing
like-
from 10 down through 16 is all about,
I can't conceive.
Sexual sin.
yeah.
Okay, now, so we're not going to get down in the weeds in that area. The point of that verse is they're both guilty. As they say, it takes two to tango. They're both guilty. They both should be punished by death according to the law of Moses.
But
If their
knows.
sin is discovered, they should be executed. However, that's not exactly what happens.
This was a secret.
So David hears from Bathsheba. He gets a text, I'm pregnant. Uriah has been away too long. It clearly is David's child. And so David starts trying to figure out how he's going to cover up this sin, because the penalty for adultery is death. So
Let's get Uriah to sleep with his wife so he won't look so guilty.
he sends a note to the general, to Joab. Hey, I need you to send Uriah back here. I'd love to get a report from him about how you're doing, how the men are doing, how the war's going, but also, and more importantly, to give him an opportunity to spend some time with Bathsheba. Because he's a lonely, frustrated warrior. He's been away for a while, and certainly he will want to cuddle with his sweet young bride when he gets home. But the thing is that Uriah doesn't stop at the house first. He goes right to the palace. He goes right to David to give the report. Because why? Because he is a good soldier. Because he is loyal. He is following orders. He is not stopping off for donuts or a soda or a facial or what. He's doing what he's supposed to do. He's a good man. So thanks for the report, Uriah. Hey, by the way, why don't you just go home? Go on home.
See the little woman for a minute, and
He doesn't even mention
no, that's right.
Bathsheba or the wife. He says, why don't you go home and wash your feet? Is that what yours says?
Yes.
Really?
Go down to your house and wash your feet.
You have a line note there on washing your feet?
It says, wash your feet, a contemporary idiom meaning spend some time at home.
Go home and relax. What does he not
11A,
say specifically
go,
is most
and David
important?
said to Uriah,
Well understood.
Go down to your house and wash your feet.
Okay. In more than one place in the Bible, and this would be one of those moments, in more than one place in the Bible, when it talks about feet, it's actually talking about a person's genitals.
Okay then.
Like it says that people are covering their covering their feet with their wings. The cherubim, it's not really covering their feet. It's really covering their middle
Their
area.
private parts.
Yeah.
Their personalities.
So what I believe,
Well, I never would have figured that one out by myself.
what I believe David is saying here is,
This is James' favorite part.
I'm so glad I'm not there tonight.
go home to your pretty wife for some together time, Uriah.
Wash your feet.
You deserve a break today. Go. Okay?
James is the one having all
if
the
you're
problem with it, Joanne, not the rest of us.
if you're not convinced that this is a real possibility, then I'm just weird. Down in verse 11, Uriah asks the king, how could I go home and make love to my wife? Well, nobody said anything about making love to his wife. He just said, go home and wash your feet. Oh.
He's glad. This is why we don't hear about this in church, because James can't get through it.
David is working really hard to cover up his sin. Whoa, no, take the rest of the day off, Uriah. Why don't you just go on home, have a good time, wink, wink, winkety, wink, wink, wink. We'll see you in the morning.
See the little woman, she's really, she's been waiting for you.
So, after he dismisses Uriah, sends him home, he also sends a gift, which is not like gold or silver. It is a portion from the king's table. He's sending a to-go box of royal food, which is going to be the best food. I'm sure that there is wine in there as well. He's sending home a meal, food, wine, treats, candles, Barry White CD. Go on home.
Everybody.
I don't even,
That might not be in your translation.
I don't know who Barry White is, so I'm sorry.
Oh, you don't? Oh, he's
Very Manilow, but not Barry White.
Almost 40 years, I don't remember any of
he's
that.
kind of a romantic singer.
I've heard
He's a
of him.
black guy.
I've heard him referred to in books. Put on the Barry White CD and we'll wash our feet.
If you watched an old Super Bowl commercial, they had it on and the guy was shaking his beer and then he opens the beer and it goes all over.
I missed that one too, I guess.
Oh,
That's a
Cedric the Entertainer, that's the funniest commercial.
Okay, so here's Uriah's gone. Take this food and drink to his house. Here's everything that he will need to have a super nice night with his wife. Here's the problem. Uriah, who is ever devoted, ever faithful, doesn't go home to his wife. He stays right out there on the front porch, somewhere near the entrance to the palace. He won't go home and indulge in domestic pleasure, which is surprising for a guy who's been away at war,
Yeah.
but it's pretty honorable. And then he says, how could I go home to rest and relax when we're in the middle of a war? How can I make love to my wife when the rest of Israel's soldiers are away from their wives? And so he camps out at the palace with the rest of David's servants. Maybe Uriah is thinking, he's trying really hard to get me to go home. Not sure what that's all about.
But do you think he would say, I wonder what's going on here and why does he want me to go see my wife? I don't.
Why does he want me to go wash my feet?
Yeah. Yeah,
My feet are fine. I just washed them. So a second attempt is made by David to get Uriah to go home to Bathsheba. And so he couldn't send him home when he was sober. So, hey, why don't you come back tomorrow night? We'll crack open a few cold ones. Let's talk about the war. Share. We'll hit the Wayback Machine. Talk about some of our old victories. And oh man, it's gonna be great. So Uriah comes over. They both get pretty comfortable, relaxed.
Bombed is a good word.
Yeah. And even when he's drunk, he wouldn't go home. He still spent the night at the palace. So one more time, David's plan to cover up his sin is foiled. A commentator said, Uriah drunk is more pious than David sober.
Oh.
Drunken Uriah is more righteous and more holy and more noble than David is sober.
That's not saying much for David, is it?
But it is the truth, for sure. Uriah is the stand-up guy. So ultimately, the first two attempts to get him to go home to Bathsheba have failed. So David takes drastic measures to hide his sin. At David's direction, in a letter delivered by Uriah himself. That's how much David can trust this guy. I'm giving you sealed orders to give to Joab. It's about you being dead. But will you carry this back to Joab?
That cracks me up.
Absolutely, sir. You can trust me 100%. David is a snake in this story. Uriah is placed at the point of the most intense fighting against the Ammonites. And the instruction is, when he's up there and engaged, all the rest of you start sneaking back, retreat, to leave him there so he will absolutely get killed by the enemy.
David plotted Uriah's death so he could marry Bathsheba himself as quickly as possible.
Okay, so he has executed adultery, and now he is planning murder. Even though he's not the one throwing the spear or firing the arrow, David is absolutely guilty of murder. Accomplice is good old Joab. So we get down to verses 16 to 24.
So does Joab? Joab doesn't know what he's doing, though.
I think, knowing Joab as well as we do, my guess is he's probably got something figured out. He asks Uriah to come home, and then when he sends him back, he wants him dead.
That doesn't sound right.
So, Joab gets the orders. They go to carry out the plot, but Joab does make some adjustments. Rather, so Uriah and a group of men do attack the city where the fighting is the most intense. But rather than calling for retreat and leaving Uriah there to fight alone, all the men stay. And the people of the city of Rabbah are up on the city wall, and they're firing down arrows, throwing rocks or whatever. And a number of the king's men are killed in battle, including and especially poor Uriah. And the result is sent back. We get to read the aftermath of David's sin and the cover-up in verses 25 to 27. And it is shameful. Just want to let you know, Uriah is dead.
So,
Well, don't let this displease you. War happens. Sucks to be him. That seems to be David's attitude.
And the 7,500 other guys that died, it doesn't matter.
do
But
you think
with it,
Joab didn't retreat because that would leave him standing there by himself, and the rest of the guys would say, well, wait a minute, why did we leave him there? So he leaves everybody there.
Maybe.
So,
Maybe.
so David doesn't look so guilty.
well, the other
So
guys
there's
would
not an
follow.
investigation.
Yeah.
So
the
that
other-
Joab doesn't look so guilty.
Yeah, because otherwise, if he sends everybody up there and then everybody but Uriah comes back, that looks like a setup. If he sends everybody up there and then leaves them there and they all get shot at, that don't look so bad.
Yeah.
Dear Joab, sorry to hear about Uriah. It's the way it goes.
Life sucks.
But don't let it bother you too much. You need to move on. Push harder. Overthrow the city of Rabbah. Maybe this is like his pep talk. Like, in the name of Uriah, defeat the Ammonites. All for Uriah. The words are intended. No, not the words back to Joan. The words back to Joab. It's fun. NIV says to encourage him. It really means to stiffen him up, to harden him to go back to war. I would like to believe that even if Joab has been sort of a ruthless, vengeful guy in the past against Abner, that he's been with Uriah just as long.
So he
This-
lost his friend.
And this is a comrade in arms, and this did not go down the way it should. Maybe he's kind of lost his nerve, and David says, hey, war happens, buck up, take the city. Then, verse 26, Bathsheba mourns Uriah's death. It literally reads, now when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. When I read that sentence, like, it's clear that whoever is writing this wants to make sure that we don't miss the point here. Uriah was her husband, and he's been killed by the guy who is not her husband. It's a tragedy. She is another man's wife. She is not David's for the taking. And so she mourns.
One short sentence, 3 times we're reminded that Uriah was the husband.
The wife of
Uriah's wife
Uriah.
heard that her husband was dead. She mourned for him. After that time of mourning was over.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Jewish mourning. Jewish law requires the person to be buried the same day of their death. And then there's a set, because there's not embalming and refrigerators. Okay. So there is a 7-day mourning period that begins the day of their death and the day of the funeral. A special meal of condolence is provided after the burial. Mourners remain in the house of mourning with friends and family throughout the week. Prayers are offered. Readings from the Torah, from the Pentateuch, Genesis to Deuteronomy, are shared. Candles are lit. Grooming stops. Marital relations stop. Entertainment stops. Regular study stops. In some cases, mourners wait 30 days before cutting their hair. Okay? Their mourning is a little more intense than ours. Somebody dies, we take cold cuts and cookies. 3 or 4 days later, there's a funeral, there's a meal, there's burial, and everybody goes home.
But not till after the snow melts.
Right. Sometimes in the Old Testament, the mourning was just 7 days. There were some people for whom the period of mourning was 30 days, like when Moses died or when his brother Aaron died, Israel mourned for 30 days. It might include the tearing of hair or even the shaving of your head. It might include throwing ashes on yourself, tearing your clothes, changing into sackcloth and ashes. There'd be a lot of beating your breast to show your deep grief. We don't really know exactly what the level is here. My belief would be that David is moving fast. So after a week, I wish we knew how long it is between she took a bath and went home and, by the way, I'm pregnant.
Yeah, because that doesn't happen. You don't know that for a while.
Yeah,
It'd be
especially when there's no
Yeah.
EPTs to pick up at the drugstore.
Yeah.
She missed that bath with the uncleanliness for a couple months, and she's like, "Oh,
Now I'm pregnant.
So she
Now a
could
month
be
later, I'm starting to show.
a couple months, 3 months down the road, so I believe that as soon as it was possible. So day number 7, all the mourning is over. David brings her into the palace. He marries her.
one of my faithful servants
And
has
find
passed away, so now I need to provide for his wife."
See, I think he probably gets credit for that
I'm sure he does.
from all kinds of people. Like, oh my gosh,
David's
David
sweet.
is such a good man. He's
Baby,
taking good care of this military hero.
Right, yeah, he died in battle, and he was such he honored me in every way, so I need to take care of his wife. It's kind of like the
And
Mormons do,
maybe
you
his
know.
baby.
Taking care of this
Because
poor,
she's having the baby soon.
poor young widow. Unfortunately, there's not an eyewitness to say, "Oh yeah, when Uriah was here."
Mhm. could've
David
snuck
can
home
say
then.
that. David can give that story. Only the people who work in the palace know that that's not true. So anyway, months later, at least 5, 6 months later, she delivers a son to David. And so it appears that David has gotten away with it. This horribly selfish, awfully sinful, murderously heinous thing that he has done. He has gotten away with it, he believes. He has both successfully committed both adultery and murder, which is 2 of the 10.
And doesn't he think that God doesn't know?
Well, I'm sure there's the next chapter here.
David's 2 great sins are committed when David
all in one time.
remained in Jerusalem instead of being out with his army where he should have been. He commits
Killed 2
adultery
birds with one
first,
stone there, didn't he?
And then murdered. Yeah.
and then, as sin so often does, it leads to something worse.
David's
It
gonna
begins
get his
to
comeuppance.
compound. So, as second, he plots the murder of her husband. He thought he got away with it, but he didn't. And the text tells us this thing that David had done was evil in the sight of the Lord. David had done a wicked thing. One of the commentaries said, better than I can, it is an indelible stain upon the character of David and painfully humiliating proof of the awful lengths to which the very best of men may go when they forfeit the restraining grace of God. That's perfect language. It is a painful, humiliating proof that even the best of men will go to great lengths when they have turned their back on God and done exactly what they want to do. They will justify lying, stealing, murder.
A little understatement. Not only had David brazenly violated God's law, even worse, he has shamelessly abused his royal power, which the Lord has entrusted to him to shepherd the Lord's people.
A little bit later, when Bathsheba's son, ironically, Solomon, wrote a proverb in 28:13 that says, "Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy." The Message Bible has it like this: you can't whitewash your sins and get by with it. You find mercy by admitting and leaving them. There's one other passage I think is germane here. 1 Kings 15:5. For David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord and had not failed to keep any of the Lord's commands all the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. This chapter is a huge black mark. 1 Kings 15:5. Great big black mark against his life, which otherwise is fairly exemplary. We disagree with some of his moves because we're not 3,000-year-old Israelite kings and warriors. But as far as the Bible is concerned, David had been a man after God's own heart. He had followed the Lord. He had been faithful to him. But 2 Samuel 11 is
Whoops.
ugly. It is a painful judgment against David, and it should serve as a dire warning to us. You can't cover it up. You're not fooling anybody. You're certainly not fooling God. You might think you're going to get away with it. Your sins will find you out. Now, when we get together the next time, we're going to look at Psalm 51 and the next chapter, which is how God deals with David's knuckleheaded actions. Okay?
David had to know that he was making a terrible mistake, but not at the time.
I'm not sure he had the capacity for rational thought.
Not at that time.
So, that brings us to the close of a big, ugly chapter.
Aren't you glad that one's
Any
over?
big lessons you're taking away from it?
Mind your
You
business.
can't hide from God.
Yes.
You can't hide from God. Mind your business, your P's and Q's and all the rest of the letters as well.
When you're supposed to be at war, go.
Even the best of men screw
And if the
up.
king tells you to go home and wash your feet, do it.
Go.
Honey, the king told me. Sorry, it's a royal order.
I wonder, just out of
You would have been alive, at least.
out
I
of
wonder why Joab
wondering.
went ahead with him and Uriah were.
why Uriah, what would have happened different if Uriah had gone home?
You'd probably have been alive.
Well, and he might have, but it would have changed the whole thing.
Not necessarily. Uriah could have said, "You don't look like me."
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I
one of the
was
things
thinking-
that
I was thinking that
one of the
too.
things that we read about David, we don't have, there's not a
He
picture,
looks like
but
the
it
king.
says that he is ruddy and handsome, which meant that he ruddy has to do with sort of reddish. I believe it's entirely possible that David was a ginger.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that Uriah would have also been a ginger. I believe he's totally Middle Eastern and would probably have been sort of dark and dark-headed and dark-eyed. And here's David with this reddish complexion and auburn hair and
Well, now you've seen my 3 children. I had a redhead, a blonde, and a brunette, and they all had the same mother and father. Jim is me all over the place. Rob looks so much like his dad, I want to slap him every time I see him. And Penny, people say she looks like me, but she would never admit to that. But my 3 children are totally different looking.
well,
Jim has freckles, the other 2 don't. They all have dimples.
you all are the ones who said, I wonder how things would have been different. It could have been that it would have been very obvious. Maybe David is short, curly-headed, red-headed boy.
And Ray.
And he's
tall and blonde.
Yeah, he's this big,
How the other thing-
burly dude. I don't know.
I know, I picture him being red too.
So I think probably the most important thing to learn though is that your sin will find you out. Even if Uriah in his drunken stupor induced by the king had gone home and he and Bathsheba had spent the night together, I still think that somehow God is going to bring justice back around to show David he can't get away with it.
Because Bathsheba would know, regardless.
Yeah.
She would know.
The one thing that I wonder in this story every time I read through it is, what did Bathsheba know, and when did she know it? Did she know that David sent orders for her husband to be killed? Was she part of the conspiracy? Was she really deeply affected by Uriah's death? Because she may have only been going along with David in the first place. He's the king. He's going to kill me if I don't.
Or he's the king, and if my husband dies, then I can become part of the palace.
There's lots of
Yeah,
questions I have.
You know, and if they were really, really religious, why would she have done that in the first place?
Well, I
Some
don't know
people
how
would
much
say
it is
it's because of
religious
his
and how
power
much is
over her.
ritual. You know, if you're doing it, if they've been doing it for hundreds of years and you're doing it because you've always done it, but not understanding why. You know what I'm saying? They may not have made the spiritual connection. It's like, this is just what we do.
Okay, we are going to get together again in a week.
This whole part leaves a lot of questions, doesn't it?
You can think about them some more over the next week. We will pick up with Psalm 51, which is David's response after he gets called out by Nathan the prophet in 2 Samuel 12. Thanks for being here. You can go back and watch this whole thing over and over again as many times as you'd like.
One thing